Welcome to another edition of ChatNAPT with AI Chatbots Chuck and Howie. Another edition of All Things Metrology, sponsored by the National Association for Proficiency Testing. Again, like to be on my co-host.
Chuck. Yeah.
Okay, it's another great day here.
Great. It's raining.
Well,
it's not snowing, so that's great. You guys actually had tornadoes touching down in Arkansas. I don't think it was near Little Rock, but it was pretty big storms.
Oh yeah, we had one just not even 20 miles from us.
20 miles.
Yeah, we had that. Well, most of the dangerous ones were southeast, and the big stretch of storms is, people probably, don't care, but the storms went right over our head until they got really, really, really bad. Yeah. And then right along the entire Mississippi, all the way up into Ohio, it was so bad. There was 157 warnings, and I guess like 17 major tornadoes.
Yeah, we saw pictures of two of them on the news, just hitting the ground and tearing everything up. Now, they weren't like in a populated area for the ones they were showing, but it still was tearing everything up.
The problem is we're going to get really warm today. It's going to be like 84 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then this cold front moves in again, which doesn't do good for my quote-unquote issues I have with my
hot air masses, cold air masses. That's where the tornadoes are born.
Yep. And so we're going to have all that tonight. So it's going to be an interesting night. But anyway, I'll just, take a couple shots of tequila and go into our safe room. And, unfortunately, that's what it's going to take. Just be prepared, which we are. We're prepared for it. So, hopefully nothing severe happens. But, where we moved to a state, I don't know why we did this, but we moved to a state where every April it's got tornadoes. So,
yeah.
Anyways, hey, so we got to talk about our guest today. We got another wonderful guest today. We have a person that we've spent a lot of time talking about, training. That's been one of our major topics, is the lack of training that we have into metrology and how we're going to tackle the problem of the metrologists not getting enough training. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about that today. And so today our guest is going to be Ryan Egbert.
Yes.
And I'm excited to talk to you about what his approach is to training. Ryan is the owner and president of Sine Calibration Metrology Training. He's got a great program that he's offered now to provide another solution to training, which I think is widely needed. As we talked about before, there's a ton of people out there that need training. So I'm excited about having him on board with us.
Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hello. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to have you on.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Chuck was just saying a whole bunch of lies about, how you started out and what you're doing now. I think they sound like they're fake news. So why don't you tell us the real story?
My path was, I think, one of the more common, which is the military, and got to start out at what people call the P-Mel school there in Biloxi, Mississippi, back in 1999, and then worked my way through the ranks, decided to stay in the Marine Corps, and that gives you opportunities, right? And I got to do a whole bunch of different things, from lab management to even in deployment, running a whole avionics department type stuff. But then I got really lucky, and that's where my last duty station before I retired, I got to be an instructor. And then that's where, obviously, cool. I have a lot of teachers in my family, and I didn't know, I really didn't think of it as something you inherit, is teaching.
Uh-huh.
But I see it in my own kids. Like, I have a son that he'll learn something, he'll go and teach it to his sister just instantly. And you're like, okay,
how about that?
Maybe it is something in the blood a little bit. But so I left the Marine Corps, though, honestly thinking I'd go to the civilian world and everything's kind of figured out, right? And I'd have a pretty natural path to follow. And it just wasn't the case. And it was hard finding some footing. And I had always, when I transitioned out, I thought about doing some sort of training program or whatever, but you don't know what the landscape is until you get out there and just trying to survive.
It's kind of hard to estimate the market for that, right? The market demand.
Right. And how to package it, right? How does that work? Because I've told this story for years that it started as a product that I just planned it to be floating out there to help other people like me transition.
Yes.
Some of these things, I didn't know what NCSLI was. I didn't know what MSC was, any of these things. And so it's having some sort of program to make that transition easier. And then, of course, when people saw that, hey, built the full course, and then the rest is,
So you're familiar with SkillBridge?
I am now. And
Yeah.
because a lot of people I help support and a lot of labs I support use SkillBridge.
So I don't know the history of SkillBridge, how long it's been around. Do you happen to know that?
I don't know the specifics. No.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of recent. Or maybe it's morphed from something that it was before. But anyway, the SkillBridge is, built to help people transition from the military to civilian life.
Mhm.
And one of the benefits of that is that it, from what I understand, and I know that Transcat uses it, but I haven't been involved directly with it. What I'm hearing is that they can release the service member up to 6 months early at no cost to the company that picks them up because they're getting paid from the government, right?
Right.
And that helps them transition into a new role for civilian life, which is brilliant.
Amazing.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish
But
I would have
I don't know. I mean, is what you're doing with Sine Calibration and Metrology training supplementary to what they're offering, or is it duplicating some of what they're offering? I don't know how that fits together.
It's an interesting question because I've become, not on purpose, somewhat of an expert in some of these things because we are looking more seriously at things like accreditation, right? And so then you start to realize there's a lot of laws, like actual federal, state laws that come into play. And so SkillBridge is an official program that people can do legally, like through statute, right?
Okay.
Where to be a part of that, we would also have to have some sort of a accreditation or some sort of approval. If you don't have an accreditation, then you need a wide approval. And there's many ways of doing those things, but obviously they get exponentially more expensive. So the whole point is that right now where we're at in the industry, that's something we're evaluating. Is there enough need for that? And is there enough cohesion we can have between those programs that it makes sense for the cost of accreditation?
Yeah.
And kind of merge those things, right? Because there's also thoughts of, well, what about combining those and our program into a journeyman type thing so that in the SkillBridge they get attached to a person, in other words, or a trainer, right? So there's a lot of things that we're looking at of what's the best path forward. Because I want to there are options out there that have been explored that it would be costing people $20,000 per metrologist to get through that kind of training. And I don't think the industry can support that, right? So there's routes we have to go that make sense. But
so let me ask you,
go ahead.
So for the audience, just expand a little bit on what you offer for training.
Oh, sure.
Where it is today and where you're looking to go to in the future.
Sure. So right now we do what is more considered professional development. So we're a non-accredited training program that's meant to be utilized inside of a work environment. Now, it can be used by an individual trying to get into the industry, but it's angled towards the entry-level person, right? Mm-hmm. Someone that it's intended to be that foundational program that someone goes through to be in the industry. Like the whole idea is that everybody has this information, right? And so right now it's split into disciplines. So general metrology being the first, that's where people will learn about uncertainties and all the other weird oddities that we have to learn about in metrology, right? Like what our special nuances are, terminologies, how to round, what are our resources for those things, Mm-hmm. And then we go into disciplinary things like electronics, temperature, pressure, force, torque. And the way we went about it is at the time, there were some statistics that I believe we got from Qualler. I don't believe I'm wrong on that, on what was on the average scope across the United States.
Okay. Yep.
In accredited labs.
You should use an example of someone that used your services that came on that was never in metrology before, signed up for Sine Calibration, went through your program, and is now a very successful metrologist. Anybody that you know that I might know that is a student of your services?
There's a lot. We are working on some of those for the podcast, actually, kind of from the eyes of the technician that are going to be coming on. We like to be very careful with confidentiality. Like we don't, unless someone has publicly stated these things, and there has been mentions over the years in groups like Facebook and things like that.
I can state it's my son.
Okay.
I figured you were somewhere.
Yeah, we use Sine. That's why I know so much about it, because
Yeah.
5 years ago when he left school, he didn't know where he wanted to go, and he wanted to come into the metrology business, and we use Sine Calibration. So it's a great tool. Like you talked about, Ryan, it's a wonderful tool to give introduction to metrology and give you all the basics that you need to become introduced into metrology. It's an absolute fabulous tool. And I think that almost every podcast we've had, we've talked about where the lack of the skill of the technician is becoming apparent more and more.
Yes.
So part of what we want to have with you on for is that void that you're filling. And, I tease that, we've used your services, but it's truly a success story. And like you said, you've had tons of people that have gone down this path, but it's definitely a tool that's needed. And I don't think there's enough people that know that your service is out there.
Well, it is absolutely a success story. You started him out doing that with NAPT, and now he works for Transcat. That's fantastic.
Boom.
It's an example of a success story.
Well, he's worked for Transcat for other reasons, but we're not going to go into that today.
Our benefit, your loss.
And the hard thing is, we mentioned, you guys bring up SkillBridge and stuff like that. And I find it such an awesome tool. However, the only problem is that the training of our military calibration personnel is just not what it used to be. Right, exactly. And I mean in volume. And I have my own internal people that, again, I can't divulge, but, they're giving me data that when I used to teach, I had, like on my fitness reports, 200 and something students in a year, just for me personally. Mm-hmm. And now they have the entire, going through the whole GCAMS program in an entire year, 40 people.
Wow.
So that's a significant decrease. Yeah. And I don't have all the ins and outs of that data, so please no one go too crazy with it. But I think we all feel it, right? I think that's more important. And so I don't think we're able to transition as many people as we'd like, unfortunately.
Man, I can't tell you the number of questions I got reeling in my head from all the stuff we've been talking about. Let's start with finishing your thought on where you are now. You described that. Where do you want to take this?
Great. So I think the professional development that I mentioned, we're maintaining that because it's been so vital for a lot of companies, because we can come in and actually help them develop their training program, because that's a huge issue right now. Is not everybody that's in charge of a training program has a training program that exists, nor have they ever set one up for metrology, nor tied it to a scope, and and all these things that go into it, right? And so we have those plans. We finished our beta of a Train the Trainer last year, and so that still maintains as a core part of our program is the non-accredited, and that will always remain non-accredited for that malleability. It allows us to customize it to the customer how we want to, and we're not under any rules.
Yep.
Now, we also, and this isn't an official announcement or anything. This is a long road, but we have decided to pursue accreditation with the goal, hopefully down the road, is that a degree can be gained. Now, this would be something that would be a 2-year program or something of that nature. And then if a 2-year program is successful, move on to a 4, that type of thing.
So there's a degree curriculum, right? A matriculating curriculum. But then would you offer certificates in something less than a full degree?
Sure. And we currently do. We offer ours in the form of badges, which are digital credentials.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we're moving that also forward. This year, we're moving forward with those being blockchain. And that's for future projects as well. Things like digital certificates and things like that. Yeah. We're going to make sure that Sine's credentials can be easily implemented into those.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we're already ahead of the game on that. We have some people that currently hold them in what they're called wallets. I don't know if you're familiar with the blockchain stuff.
I've heard a few things about that. I had attended a paper that Michael Schwartz had talked about those types of things. Yeah.
Where the digital badges, you have a backpack. So when they move over to blockchain, then they're in a wallet. So it's all these little semantics, right? Like, it's a blockchain, or is it centralized? But that makes it where the credential's always available. If the server goes down at Badger or Cornerstone or wherever it's, those credentials are held, theoretically, then they can't be verified, right?
Yeah.
So that's
let's talk about the competitive landscape for you. Because from our perspective, especially looking at results of proficiency tests and the questions that we're getting and the technical advisor team is getting, it's clear that there's a lack of training and lack of mentorship. So there's a strong need for better training, more in-depth breadth, right, of training. And so I'm aware of other companies that provide metrology training, and we've used some of those as well as Sine Calibration. I don't think that there's enough there as it is, so I think there's plenty of room for all players.
Oh, yeah.
But what is that from your perspective? Are you competing directly with like A2LA workplace training, or is that something that you just see as plenty of room in the playground for everyone?
So we have education side and certification side. So there's also the CCT is also brought up as a possible competitor with our CMT, our certification, which is is our level 1 certification, right? So with in both of those cases, I feel like we are attempting to do something different, right? Where instead of providing a somewhat of a list of training and it be assigned in however manner that the management wants or whatever, we're trying to assign an actual curriculum to this. What is the end product from this? And that's, the level 1 program is designed from what I've seen, and not only when I worked in a commercial lab, but from the feedback of the industry, right? What does an average technician, if we're going to, and we focus a lot on third party, right? Commercial calibration, because yes, is a lot of our customers government contractors or we'll leave it at that, like the bigger agencies, yes.
Yeah.
But those are much more restricted technicians, right? They'll have a much smaller scope of work. If they learn our entire curriculum, that's great, but they might work in pressure for 15 years or something like that, right? Where someone that's going and doing on-sites every day, affecting manufacturing and all those type of things, that's who we're trying to aim for and give them a curriculum where they can go out there and be successful. Because we're not only jettisoning people out of, or not having enough inflow into the industry, we're also jettisoning people. And I've said this before, we get a lot of those exit interviews that labs don't. They'll talk to us as they're trying to find new employment or whatever. And we'll say, like, what happened, And they're not supported. They're not feeling supported. And it comes a lot down to training. But the big picture is similar to like what we're trying to create with a level 1 program is when you go out there, do you know what you're looking at? Hey, is this a thermistor? Is this an RTD? Am I looking at something that's giving me a pulse? Do I recognize these signals that I'm going out there and calibrating? Or am I sitting there for hours scratching my head, customers mad at me, my boss is mad at me because I'm not getting things done fast enough? Well, I'm just going to write down the data.
Even worse, the technician is befuddled, and I like that word.
Yeah.
And asking the customer, how do I connect this? You're supposed to be the expert that they've hired to come in and do the calibration. That's not a good position to be in.
Absolutely.
Well, we've had this conversation many times, and a lot of our clients would get mad at me for saying this. So maybe hopefully a lot of the NAPT clients are not listening to this one. But the problem is, and this is a common problem, is that they're sending technicians, like you mentioned, Ryan, they're leaving the job because they're not supportive. And what we're finding out is we're seeing the people that participate in our programs, probably the number 2 reason is they're not qualified enough to understand the measurement. So they're out there being required to make measurements. They don't understand. They're being required to fill out a form, follow a procedure that requires them. They don't understand what they're doing. And I'm a big proponent of giving more training to people. I've said for 40 years, understand the measurement. And we're not doing it anymore. And so, anything that we can do as a community to get the technicians to understand what they're doing, to me, is something that we've got to do more of. Otherwise, we're going to have, like you said, people leaving the job because they're not being supported, which is, a negative thing. And we want to do the exact opposite. We want to train these people to do everything about the measurement, in my opinion.
So you mentioned the example of pressure certification. And that made me think of our recent podcast that we did with Dilip Shah as our guest. And we were talking about the differences between industrial metrology, scientific metrology, legal metrology. And I know for a fact after Transcat had owned a company that was only legal metrology, right? That we had guys that were going out and installing truck scales on the highways, cattle scales or livestock scales, and then also servicing smaller scales and balances as well.
Mhm.
That type of legal metrology requires certification in every state and for every type of scale that you're calibrating. Right?
Yeah.
So these guys were in the state of Wisconsin. They also serviced parts of, I think, adjoining states. So they had to be certified in each state for up to like 7 different types of scales, right? And they had to maintain those certifications year after year, or they couldn't perform that because that's the requirement for legal metrology. And most people aren't in the legal metrology field. There are
Right.
a lot of people who are, but most calibration metrology is industrial metrology. And so we're talking about targeting industrial metrology and having certifications for those, maybe not required by state, right? This could be a national certification or just a career certification.
Sure.
But I think it's going to help organize and standardize something that's not standardized today, right? Today,
Exactly.
what you have is, did you go to the PML school or TMDE, right? In the military, do you have a certificate from that? Okay, that's one form of training. Have you gone to OEMs and done their training? Right? It could be a few hours or a full day or a couple of days.
Sure.
And that's pretty much by instrument type or by instrument model, right? So those are very specific.
Right.
But
Unfortunately.
it's not really getting to standardizing the industry for training. So that's where I agree with you. That's where we need to go.
Oh, and I'm yes, exactly. And so when you ask me, do I view them as competitors? I think if you look at the black and white of it, of course, there's going to be, if there's customers that view getting training as you must choose this one or this one, and that's it, then yes, of course,
Yeah.
we're competitors. But really, I view us as Sine as the entity that's trying to give that firm curriculum, right? That progression path. But you find when you do accreditation or you do these type of things, it's very strict, right? And so we'll have very strict requirements. And so that leaves a lot of room. I mean, metrology, there's so much room for in-between training of all the other things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's where I view the other places come in great. And you'll see a lot of similar contributors on both sides, right? So it's not like you're losing out on quality either way. So I hope that makes sense. I think
does.
that I'm coming to this from the aspect that I would really like us all to have a foundational or a general curriculum we all go through. We all have the same starting point, but then each career is different. And we have to train how we need to for our career, you know?
Yes, I agree. All right. I've got to ask you, because I keep getting distracted and looking at this, looks like upside down broccoli with something on top of it on the desk there. What in the world is that behind you?
Oh, my octopus.
Oh,
my
okay.
my kids gave me this for Christmas. Named Gary.
Gary,
So this
that's
is
awesome.
Yeah, Gary the octopus. This is the metrology octopus.
Really? How does that relate to metrology?
I don't
Is
know.
it like the 8 pillars of metrology?
Thank you. Yes.
Is there 8 now? I always thought there were 6, but okay.
Well, no, he has 8 legs. You got to have 8 pillars now.
Okay.
So create a couple more.
You're going to define a few more. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chuck,
Anyways,
do you, I'll divert you. I've been asking a lot of questions, so I'll divert you
no,
with
that's
questions.
I like your questions. It's you guys are really getting into it. So I just sat back and just like listening to it because you guys are really getting into it. So I want to get back to Sine Calibration. What was the decision that made you start Sine Calibration? There had to be something that said, hey, there was this void out there. I'm tired of being a metrologist. I'm tired of turning wrenches. I want to do something else. What was that decision?
So, so forgive me if any of this is a repeat for anybody out there, but some of this was, like I said, a product. So I was actively working as a technical manager, and I had, for a very long time, had a curriculum I had put together just for between the Marine Corps and then getting into the civilian community, in between jobs. I had, I think it was 75 days of terminal leave. So I had some time to kind of organize some stuff. But like I said, when Howard asked me like how to package this, and I would get, as I'd be out doing on-sites, I'd get questions of like, where did you learn this? And I'd say, oh, from the military, but then I also taught it. And so they would ask me a lot of questions. They're like, you should put together a course, right? Like that just was something that commonly happened.
Okay.
And then once everything got put together, the company I was working for just never gave me a response if they wanted to work together with me on it. And eventually I had to detach from them. And then I was pretty much on my own. And the pandemic happened. And so then I was really on my own, because at that point in time, there was plans for a location here in Utah. There was, I don't think we had a full agreement, but luckily we got let out, or maybe we did sign a full agreement, but they let us out because of the pandemic, luckily, because there was just no way we were going to be able to carry any clients coming in for that year for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But the beginning parts of it were a lot of text-based and audio-based, if you could imagine. And so when I started having time from when I was released from my full-time job there, and then I was doing this full-time, that's when I made the decision to go buy a camera and some nicer mics, some lights. I bought some cheaper, some entry-level lights and all that stuff, and I went for it and decided, you know what, I'm going to fully pursue this. I reached out to Henry Zumbrun just out on a whim because Force was one I was not comfortable with originally, being the expert in, and there was a couple others, and I had like Joseph Rendoni come on. We put out the feelers for some people. And so we had some contributors for that initial project. But as I mentioned, it was not quite what it is now, right? Where it fully fleshed out like learning pathway, right? It was more lessons learned put together. And then once everything kind of coalesced, then the forward path was a little bit more clear. Oh, okay. So more like a full school into this thing. What would be in that? And that's where some of the decisions of like RF and microwave, should we put that in there? And because I taught it for the military, I did put it in there, but we put it as something that isn't a requirement to graduate. And that's because going back to that data that we received in starting and creating the course, where about 25% of labs, accredited labs, maybe 30, somewhere around there, do RF and microwave. So do we want to make that a requirement, right? So that's when we started realizing, okay, so we're looking at this more of like what is the overall career pathway we're looking at here? And so that's when the levels started to become more clear. The certification pathway became more clear. So really in the beginning, I do mean it. It was a product like, hey, here's a text and audio-based product on how to do CALs and how things work. And the initial customers of that were like, can you please do more, right? And then did simple recordings, and then people wanted more from that and wanted testing. And, it just one of those things that truly grew from almost nothing.
So Howard, I consider you an expert, right?
I don't know about that, but okay.
Well, and I consider myself somewhat of an expert. Did you get a call from Ryan to help him when he started his Sine Calibration? He said he reached out to all the experts. I didn't get a call. Did you get a call?
I don't think that's what I said.
Yeah. After all the training modules I've done, right? We at Transcap, there's another gentleman, Roman Melnick, and I, for quite a while, developed a lot of training for sales people, right? Non-technical people, to help them understand the business they're getting into or have been in, right? And we take typical examples of daily life and correlate it to what they know, right? So they could understand that part of it and relate to it. And then we'd advance it into industrial metrology examples and help them see that they're really the same thing, but on a higher accuracy scale.
Sure.
Anyway, so we've done that. I've developed some of our technical training for our technicians. We did a 3-part module on uncertainty training that got into probability and statistics, not deep, but just enough for them to understand how that fits. And so I was curious when you said that you have some uncertainty training there, how deep you got into that stuff.
So the uncertainty in the beginning and where it currently stands is very introductory. And that was, and there's a little bit of a story here. So when this was developed, the feel in the industry definitely was bench technician understands uncertainty is on the certificate. That's about it, right? I mean, that's generally where the industry was. And that came a lot from where I came from. The military is like, You don't need to know the uncertainty stuff until you're at that engineering position, writing the procedures, all that stuff, right? So then as time has gone on and as Sine has grown, we have a lot of individuals that take our training that are on what we call an island, right? They are by themselves. They're the only ones doing Cal in that facility. And sometimes they're the ones talking and giving advice to management on metrology things, and they need to know more, right? And we've always offered level 2 and 3, which level 2 you go through like a Dilip Shah course, or we've also partner with Greg Sanker. So there's a few different providers that we partner with, and we're open to more providers if people are listening. It's just these are the people we have networked currently. But we have a release right now that is in the middle of peer review that is coming out that now we start calculating it at level 1, where the beginning person will put together simple things like length, a couple different contributors to length. But so where we start to understand how those things are put together, what a root sum square means, why, all those type of things. But there's definitely a change where in the industry now, people need to know those things. I think also with the release of the document about decision rules from Greg Sanker, Dilip Shah, and Henry Zumbrun,
Yep.
we incorporated that as a permanent part of our program as well, because a lot of us come into Cal thinking there is a tolerance and that's it. Especially if you're in the military, you stick to the procedure.
Right.
When you go into civilian Cal, then you start to realize, wait, what? The customer has a say in all of this? And so I think it's a really good thing for people to be aware of decision rules and things to explain to customers more about their product that we as technicians are giving to these people, right? And being able to give some advice to them, but not necessarily direct them or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we sit now, where we have a release coming where that's going to be much more integrated at the level 1. But
That's a release for uncertainty calculations. What's next are you expanding your other levels? You mentioned
all
level
of
2,
them.
level 3.
So level 2, level 3, so level 3s, there are a few that are still in development, like RF and microwave. That's some bleeding edge technology stuff. Doing uncertainties on those there's probably literally a handful of entities that can do that right now. But in other ones, those are available. Most of these updates are coming to our level 1 program. And so this is in conjunction with our Train the Trainer. So our new program allows that where trainers can connect our learning objectives directly to their scopes. We teach trainers how to do that, how to flesh out a training program, a good follow-up program, how to connect it to proficiency testing as well, because that's what we utilize for level 2. Is level 1 is very much theoretical, and then we expect them to work with their trainers at the lab, right? So that's why we work a lot with trainers, is because we want these people to use our online stuff. They have to have someone facilitate their training. You can't just go from online training to Cal. We all know that. We got to actually have someone help us learn on our equipment. But then after that facilitation, we have to have follow-up. And that's been one of the biggest things that we work on with our trainers is what is that continuum plan? Because one of the biggest shocks to me as I've been training around the whole country, and now we support through Australia. I mean, we have Puerto Rico, very widespread coverage now. But people think, hey, I've been doing this for 10 years. I don't need any more training. And it's like, no, you need training constantly.
You do.
And continual.
Yeah.
Things are always changing. So
that's one of the things I'd like to relate this to, like the music industry. And I know that even professional musicians constantly are going through training that most people wouldn't even think about, right? Trying to hone their skills, keep up with the latest changes, and or just to keep themselves fresh, right? Always a good idea.
Yeah.
Can't hurt.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned one thing there, Ryan, that I want to touch base on is that we've had some preliminary conversation where we've really never expanded on it. And I'm disappointed in the ChatNAPT staff, and I say that because I'm technically retired, and just for the record, I want to make sure that the audience knows that I'm only an advisor to ChatNAPT now. They kind of run the show, and they only come to me when they have problems, and they ask me to solve problems. But there's been talk where Sine Calibration and ChatNAPT are going to do some things together, where we're going to support some of the things that you're going to be doing, and we're going to do some training together because they're going to do these on-site regional testing, and they wanted to get together where you could provide the on-site training at the same time. So these are some synergy things that we're going to do. And so when you said that your training leads to proficiency testing, I'm still hoping that you guys can get together and still solve those problems, because I just want you to know if NAP staff is not there to doing it, I'll fire them.
Well, no, I think that this will go very seamlessly. So it's intended to work with whoever, whenever they need to do it, right? That they can request it through their PT provider. What the issue right now is that we do not have a lot of throughput on level 2 training. And that's because a lot of what we're doing is catching the industry up to level 1 and refining level 1 skills. My estimates, when I talk to my own network, my own staff, I'm saying within 2 years, I'm expecting level 2s to start to maybe meet where level 1s are, maybe surpassing a little bit. Because down the road, I would like level 1 to be, if I could make that something that is even free for the public, I would love to do that. But right now, it's so vital to us operationally, I can't do that, right?
Right.
But that is the major slow down with something like that going even faster, because once people need those skills, and to be clear, it's not that I don't think they're needed out there. So just so that the audience knows, our level 2 is roughly what you would consider secondary calibrations, or when you're calibrating other people's standards. And I know there's a lot of people out there right now calibrating their own standards or their customers' standards that need that training. Like, we're talking about going past the superficial, when we're starting to talk about, the materials in our connectors for reasons past, the looks of them, right? Why do we care that we have gold-plated copper, and things like that? Or into temperature, why do we anneal a SPRT? What are some reasons that this stuff happens? But like I said, there is a big resistance out there. And I get it. People want to feel secure in their jobs, right? And they don't want people to know that they're weak. But I think it's important for people to understand that the industry is severely behind in training. It's okay to say you don't know something, or it's okay to say that your place needs training in something. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah,
right?
that's
but
the
there is like a
whole-
feeling like you have to know everything. It's like
You're absolutely right. You're hitting on a very good topic there. I've seen that happen with technicians where they feel like they have to be the one that's the go-to, right? And they don't want to be perceived as not knowing. But I try to tell as many people as I can in the industry, not just in our company, the metrology world is not an island, right? You are not a single person. It's a team effort. We should be working together and relying on each other for the answers if we don't know them. Plus, there's other people we can reach out to outside of whatever organization you're in, right? Never feel like you have to be the only one that has the answer.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like that is rampant. And there's a lot of on-site managers right now. There's a lot of just people in positions where they feel that, exactly that. They have to have everything solved. And it's not practical.
Yeah. Well, we get to move on now to transition to what we like to call, our speed questions.
Oh, yeesh.
Yeah. We get to ask you hopefully some embarrassing questions. And hopefully, boy. So Howard's always got his favorites. So I'm going to start with.
Go ahead.
What is your most memorable moment in metrology? What is there one area that you would go back and say, wow, that was really cool. That was what I'll remember, that event that happened in your metrology life.
Well, one that comes to mind instantly is the first time I traveled to Henry getting a lot of shout outs today, but going to Morehouse and seeing his big stack of weights for that big dead weight testing machine. Because that really blew my mind to see something like that in person. But I think my earliest would have to be the first time I went to a test cell for jet engines and realized what we were doing. And it was really cool, but then also very overwhelming because I don't feel like I was I knew what I was doing enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
I've been lucky. I've seen both of those. I've seen, the jet engines down at Pratt and Whitney, down there
Oh yeah.
at Palm Beach. I was part of that operation many, many years ago, and I've been to Henry's lab as well many times. But so you didn't get a chance to go over to NIST and see the million pounder then, by chance?
No, but I have
I've seen
interviewed
that
people
one.
from NIST, and there are things in work that hopefully I can go there soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Because I would like
was
to do it for the public, like also
Yeah.
put it on the YouTube and all that.
I think they need to hang a sign on there. Size matters.
what,
Right.
a million pounder or
Nice.
The million pounder. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was lucky enough to actually calibrate a load cell with Rick. Obviously, Rick Seaford, right, from NIST. He's, anyways, long story short, many, many years ago, him and his boss at the time was no longer, there. But Rick let me calibrate a cell with him and go down in the pit. And it
Yeah.
was quite an experience. There's no doubt about it back in
Nice.
the day. So,
Very cool.
Howard, you got one of your questions you like to bounce off?
So he's kind of answered it already. I can't
Uh-oh.
believe it. This is the one. So we have a list of a list of questions that we're going to ask for a different guest, right? And we can choose
Sure.
from those. We can ask the same one, different ones. Chuck put this together as a nice list. And the one that I highlighted out of like 40 questions was, if science had a mascot, what would you pick and why? And I'm sitting there looking at Gary, the octopus metrologist. I'm going to call him an octopologist. Gary, the octopologist.
I love it.
That must be the mascot. And now I'm thinking that that's your answer, right? That Gary, the octopologist, is the mascot for metrology. And,
Yes, and I probably would have answered that because I have mentioned that a few times,
Have you?
and because I do tutor from here as well. Like this is I have a camera switcher, so I
Yeah.
can go over the top of, like, I have dry wells behind me and
Yes,
stuff
I
like
see
that.
Yep. Mhm.
And so he is kind of the official mascot. Yes, so
That's
I
fun.
definitely would have said.
We're going to have to get Ted Green. He's going to be one of our guests to create a metrology series on Gary, the octopologist. That's
That would
awesome.
be awesome. Yeah,
Well,
I think
So that
Ted
was my
Green is-
question. Now, the second part of that question is, what would the theme song be for metrology? Do you have anything that would be a theme song?
I don't know. Is it a high
you-
speed thing, like a metrology?
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you
Well-
play an instrument, Ryan? Do you play?
I am a rhythm section. I formerly took bass and drums, both
Okay.
with instructors.
So we got a bass player now. We got a rhythm guitarist. We got a lead guitarist. I play the drums as well. We're
It's
gonna
been
get
a few
metrology
years
band
for me.
together.
I don't know if I know my scales anymore.
Yeah.
Well, we got Troy is on vocals as well.
Had trying vocals. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get
Yeah,
Rob
it's-
Kanacki on there too.
Is that right?
Yeah,
On vocals?
he does. Yeah, he does the karaoke
Oh, he
at
does?
the MSC
Okay.
or whatever.
Okay, interesting.
We're gonna
Okay.
have to do that.
Well, we're starting to run short on time, so we got to go through these questions a little bit quicker.
Sure thing.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, what if there's one thing you could change in metrology for the benefit of metrology? What do you think? What would you like to see changed that would make metrology better?
Oh, these are supposed to be quick.
Yeah.
Well, if I could be honest, even to remove Sine from the equation, but that everybody would agree that we need to all undergo a structured training program.
Yeah.
I mean, our job is important enough that it touches too much, right? Our job is like the sneakiest thing that is just waiting to implode.
I don't want to step on you, but I think it kind of goes along the lines that I have like this. I think that every technician should go through like a 2-year program, either through their employer or their ability not to go through it by themselves. But it's kind of like the same thing. I think that every single American should go through like a 2-year basic training military course. It's the same type of concept, because they're not learning the measurement. All they're learning how to do is to write on a piece of paper or enter the numbers into a data program. And that's the worst thing we can do right now, is not teach people the measurement. And so, to that, that's my opinion. So, Howard, you get to ask the next question.
All right. So let's say when you train a lab that's never had formal training, what's something that's funny or surprising that you've run across?
Well, probably the resistance to said training, or the lack of follow-up. So what I mean by that is there will be the desire for training. The training will happen. And then let's say I go back to the same place a year later. Sometimes I'll have the same people in that training and I'll ask them why. And they'll say, I don't know, they just told me to be here.
Oh.
And that, or we'll go through the training and I'll say, have you guys been implementing things like this? Like, let's say SPC type things, like keeping track of your triple point. And obviously these things were explained why and why we do them and all that.
Yes.
And then they'll be like, our management said we aren't going to do that. It's like, why? We're putting you through all this training.
Yeah, if you're not getting support from the management, that's even worse. Why'd you waste the time and money, right? But the attitude that you were talking about first, clearly not the right hire for the job. You got to have somebody who's motivated to want to do the job, right? And learn how to do it, right? So that's clearly not the person in the right job.
Yeah,
I think that sums it up perfectly, Howard. I appreciate that, because I think that is the most surprising thing, is that I consider I'm probably much how you guys feel, so much pride in what we do, and our industry and our whole reason that we do our job, and a lot of the people actually doing it where it matters, where they're going to customers that are manufacturing things, that are creating things, and they don't care. They aren't people that are careerists in our job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're going to tell me one place in the world that I have to travel and see, what would it be?
I want to go to the Netherlands now. Because of the Marine Corps, I did a lot of Asia Pacific, Thailand and Australia, all that stuff. I definitely want to get over to Europe and check that stuff out.
Yeah.
I have not been anywhere except for Canada and U.S.
Canada would be cool too.
Yeah, we went to the Bahamas here recently. That's Puerto Rico. That's about as far as we've gone, my wife and I. We're thinking in the fall going to Europe, England, Portugal, and Ireland. So hopefully that'll be our first Europe trip.
Just did my first over water training event in Puerto Rico a month ago, and it was fantastic. A little bit of jet lag for me, the instructor, but I find if I can get the teaching out of the way, then the rest of the time I'm, taking a nap, listen to the ocean.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you for taking part in our podcast. We look forward to the next time we can look at the addition of level 1 and level 2, and we look forward to bugging you at the upcoming Measurement Science Conference.
It's been great talking with you. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, I don't know when this will be released, but if I can put in a plug for the MSC conference, we are going to be live there. So set up with cameras, everything on our YouTube channel. So nice. starting Tuesday night, President's Reception. Yeah. 2 sessions on Wednesday, an AM and a PM, and then an AM session on Thursday, chatting with everybody that's at the conference. So my email, ryan.egbert@sinecalibration.com, or LinkedIn's always a good one. I don't do good at the Facebook or Instagrams and things like that, but LinkedIn, we have a lot of good following on there. So we do a lot of our announcements there.
Awesome.
Howard, any final words for you today?
There was one more question I wanted to ask him. If you won the lottery, what would you do? Would you have somebody take over the business and just go relax, or would you invest and grow it? What would you do?
That's not a final word.
Oh, I would have it. If it's a like a lot of money, then Sine would get fleshed out. It would have a full location and it would have all the things.
Did you hear about this guy who, it was a couple of guys who had stolen a credit card somehow. I don't know if they took the card or just lifted the numbers, and they bought lottery tickets with it. And one of them won $500,000, right?
Wow.
Now, they trace it. They know where the winning lottery ticket was sold, right? How are you going to cash that out? And it was paid for with a stolen credit card. Now
no one thought that one through.
Didn't think it through, did they? Or they're not going to cash it in. Oh my gosh, what a dilemma.
Well, if they cash it in, does that go to the real credit card owner?
So the credit card owner offered to split it with them for them to turn it in, so it doesn't just get thrown away, right?
Wow.
Probably the better of the deal, right? Just to make sure you get something out of it.
See, now that kind of lottery, I think we all know in business, a $500,000 wouldn't go very far.
No.
All right,
Chuck, any parting words of wisdom?
Yes, as usual. Remember, proficiency testing is the only true way to prove your technical competence. So you need to enroll in the proficiency test today. So with that, thank you again, everyone, for participating. We'll look forward to our next podcast. We'll have another great guest. Ryan, thank you. Howard,
Thank you.
thank you.